I'm Billy S, welcome back to the channel. A few months ago, I started a Dark Souls 3 Soul Level 1 Let's Play for my channel members. I wanted to see if I could handle it, as I've heard the horror stories over the years, and nothing motivates me more than proving people wrong. So a few days ago, I completed my recording of the run. All 25 bosses defeated on Soul Level 1. So I thought, why not do a difficulty ranking based on my experience? And to make it extra spicy, how about we rank the bosses from easiest to hardest solely based on the amount of times I died to them in my run? For example, any bosses I managed to beat on their first try automatically are placed in the lowest spots, regardless of their in-game location or usual difficulty. Trust me, you're gonna be gagged about how this list goes. So be sure to parry that subscribe button to stay up to date on all my future videos, and if you want to see the full edited Let's Play, complete with all my reactions, you can become a channel member. It's $4.99, it gets you early access to certain videos, as well as shoutouts in the description and at the end of videos as well. So let's begin. This is my Dark Souls 3 boss difficulty ranking of Soul Level 1. Tell me about your unique SL1 experiences down below. At number 25, we have Woedenaz Gundyr, the tutorial boss whom I defeated on my first attempt. Of all the bosses in a Soul Level 1, it's no surprise that Woedenaz bottoms the list because his fight doesn't even change based on this rule set. His fight happens before you gain the ability to level up at Firelink Shrine, and due to the deprived class having a solid 10 in all stats, it's not like you're inhibited by having a few less levels than the regular starting classes. The only challenge comes from knowing how to avoid Woedenaz's attacks, which revolve around strafing inwards to his right to avoid the main spear, while learning this slow rhythm he attacks with. As for the Puss of Man phase, you just switch to dodging inwards to his left and stick close so you can keep hitting him. His Puss is at its deadliest at range. It can't do anything to stop you when you're hugging Woedenaz and giving the man no breathing room. I'm also assuming that anyone attempting a Soul Level 1 run has played Dark Souls 3 multiple times, so none of us should be dying to the Woedenaz fight, and if you are, you shouldn't be dying more than once or twice. At number 24, we have the Crystal Sage, whom I defeated on my first attempt. I was worried going into this fight, as having low health and stamina feels like a nightmare when it comes to dealing with the Sage's magic spam. But as it turns out, I needn't have worried. By this point, I'd upgraded my Raw Broadsword to +3, which was doing solid damage to the boss. I was watching out for the Crystal Sage's homing crystal mass, because I know if that hits, you are dead, and my plan was just to make distance while using the environment to block certain types of magic. I got lucky that for some reason, the Sage didn't begin his clone phase after dipping below 50% health, which meant that when the clones spawned, I only needed to hit him 3 times to finish him off, and I gambled on attacking the first clone I saw, which ended up being the boss. A little bit of luck went into this run of the Crystal Sage, and I'm only realizing as I write this that I did this fight hitless. His boss run back is way harder than he is. I admit that my success came from the boss deciding not to do the clone phase earlier on, which would have made my life a little bit harder, but that's also part of the joy of Soulspawn. You never know if something will go your way or not, but you take that W every chance you get. At number 23, we have the Curse-Rotted Greatwood, whom I defeated on my first attempt. When it came to this fight, I think I played a bit suboptimally. I spent far too much time focusing down the enemies that spawn in the first phase, which meant the Greatwood would get jealous that I wasn't paying attention to it and do attacks to get me back on side. Then, in the second phase, I think I got grabbed twice by the hand, but I was lucky enough to have slithers of health that let me roll away post-animation. But none of that changes that the Greatwood is a laughably simple boss, and despite me making multiple mistakes, it wasn't able to capitalize on my mishaps. I still don't enjoy bursting all those pustules though. It was surprising to see the boss instigate phase 2 so quickly into the fight, with me not realizing it could break the floor that soon into its health bar. Not that I was complaining, as I think the fight gets easier once you're in the pit and not dealing with other enemies and their massive mallets. Still, the Great Wood experience at Soul Level 1 doesn't really change from the Great Wood experience in regular gameplay, and that's what keeps him down here. At number 22, we have the Old Demon King, whom I defeated on my first attempt. This fight falls into the category of a boss I'd convinced myself I wasn't ready to fight, only to clinch out a win without too much struggle. The Old Demon King is mostly dangerous for his various fire AoE attacks, with the Meteor spell and the expanding and retracting fire rings across the floor being the moves I was most wary of. Turns out I should have been a bit more scared of his regular slam attack, because it hit me far more than I care to admit. Getting behind the Old Demon King was definitely the strategy here, but I ended up going for more of a back off and dive in tactic to deal damage, and it worked wonders. I did have a +7 Millwood battle axe at this point thanks to all the large Titanite shards in the lake, and a pair of Titanite chunks I had on hand, which meant my damage was as solid as it could be for this portion of the game. I could have farmed Millwood Knights and Ariandel for more chunks to get a +10 weapon before Irithyll, but I don't think you could pay me to grind those guys. For most of my run, I ran the Lloyd's Sword and Shield rings, which meant I could afford to play a bit suboptimally and take hits due to my boosted defense, and I took a couple early hits in this fight, but managed to have a much cleaner second half where I was dodging attacks and barely using my Estus. He is easy, and even if I weren't using my judging system of how many deaths I took, I do think the Old Demon King would still be down here, albeit just a couple spots higher. At number 21, we have the Deacons of the Deep, whom I defeated on my first attempt. To nobody's surprise, the Deacons are bottom 5 in terms of easiest bosses. The early game fights are always going to be a lot simpler in Soul Level 1s because they're designed for low level characters to fight through them. Why I rank the Deacons above the fights already listed though is just the crowd control aspect. It is very easy to get stuck in a big group of Deacons with not a lot of stamina and suddenly finding yourself getting attacked from all sides. If you're not careful on Soul Level 1, you can very quickly die to this boss. I also found myself far less likely to try interrupting the curse attacks in the second phase, instead choosing to wait them out and go back in for the kill after. It's a tedious affair trying to make the AI of the bosses move in such a way that the main Archdeacon is easy to reach without wasting all my stamina on basic enemies, but it's not that different from a regular run. I just think this is the fight where it's easy enough to make a mistake at a point where your build hasn't fully come together yet, and that's what lands the Deacons above the Old Demon King. There's just more inherent risk here, and one bad roll, one wrong attack, you're getting pulled down into the "you died" screen. At number 20, we have the Soul of Cinder, whom I defeated on my first attempt. The main reason why I wanted to do this video based on my death count is because I managed to beat the Soul of Cinder on my very first go, and I found the idea of this meaning I had to rank him as one of the easiest fights insanely hilarious. Which is funny because I've heard horror stories of people struggling like hell against this guy, and I just didn't experience that. The one thing I did know was that in his first phase, you need to wait out the curved sword moveset because it's too difficult to reliably counter without taking damage. His regular sword is just that, a regular moveset that I found regularly fine to deal with. His spear involves a lot of dodging inwards to the right, leaving the boss wide open after most of his attacks. I didn't see the Faith moveset, maybe I got lucky there, but if you want to abuse this boss, do it every time he turns to sorcery. Those little homing soul masses are actually quite easy to predict in my opinion, I rarely got hit, and staying close to the Soul of Cinder means that all of his magic will miss you as long as you do basic strafing. For the late to end game, I rocked the Dragon Slayer's axe you get from killing Kraton and Irithyll, combined with the Prisoner's Chain you get from Champion Gundir's boss soul, and Lloyd's Shield Ring, which negated the downside of Prisoner's Chain, dealing more damage to the player. This build, I think, was just extremely solid for me, and I do wonder if it made these fights easier than they could have been. His second phase, I gotta say, Gwyn's moveset was also pretty simple to dodge. You just need to be keenly aware of when the Wombo combo is coming, and that's all you need to worry about. Every other attack is telegraphed rather well, with maybe the lightning spears that rain down from the sky being a little dangerous. Honestly, for all the talk people did on Soul of Cinder, I was a little taken aback by how easy I had it. Was it because I'd beaten Gale and Sister Fried on that same day, making him feel like child's play by comparison? I can't even say it's because I overleveled, because it's Soul Level 1, and my main weapon was a base game invasion weapon, so it didn't even come from the DLC. Which means this difficulty I experienced is the same difficulty people experienced before the release of Dark Souls 3's DLCs. So, I don't know. I think I just understand Soul of Cinder's moveset, and I learned the perks of being cautious and not getting greedy. It's as simple as that. At number 19, we have Vort of the Boreal Valley, whom I had one death to in my run. Obviously, it goes without saying that if I wasn't using my death count as a metric for this video, Vort would be right next to Youdex as the second easiest boss in the game. This is because he is the designed second boss encounter of Dark Souls 3, and thus is fought early enough that being level 1 isn't a handicap in the slightest. Not to mention, Vort has a very easy moveset to deal with, it's just a lot of dodging and strafing around him, while not standing right at his front in case he decides to slam his mace. That's why I got the one death I did here. I played badly, made that silly mistake, and it cost me dearly. Which is the same thing I did in my Dark Souls 3 regular recording as well. Long-term viewers, you've seen the footage. I am a talent at dying to Vort at least once when I shouldn't. Get him to phase 2 and the fight is yours. You dodge his 3 charges, you run up to his left side to attack while he uses his ice breath, and if you played well, that should be enough to kill him. If it isn't, just dodge a few more attacks until the pattern repeats. I'm happy I died to Vort though, because I wanted this game to humble me. I wanted this experience to shine a light on what I'm actually good at and what I could do better at. And by dying to Vort, I set myself up mentally in an underdog role, where I wasn't sure if I could succeed in this run, and every boss ended up being this momentous occasion when I won. Had I not died to Vort, we'd be waiting until the Abyss Watchers for that boss death pin to drop, and then I might have gotten a little bit cocky. At number 18, we have High Lord Wolnir, whom I had one death to in my run, and I'm still salty about it, because it was unwarranted and absolute bullshit. But hey, that's just High Lord Wolnir's MO, isn't it? Destroying the 3 rings is not hard. The order in which you destroy them, though, definitely impacts how the last third of the fight goes, as certain Wolnir attacks favour a specific arm, which means moving more, and you get the picture. The last ring is always the hardest to hit. What I wasn't expecting on my first run was for Wolnir to push me all the way to the top of the arena relatively quickly into the fight, and then use the unavoidable Abyss Gas in a spot where I had nowhere to go when he should have been summoning the Light Dagger or enemies. It felt unfair that I did everything right up to this point, but Wolnir just said, "Fuck you, I want you dead and you can't do anything to stop it." It's one of those deaths that doesn't feel like my fault, it just feels like bullshit and a punishment because I was doing well up to that point in the fight. As evidenced by my second attempt where I shattered the rings no issue and sent him plummeting because he didn't spam that specific attack. He had variety then. Wolnir, you are a messed up man. I've gone to bat for your goofy ass in the past, but you have made an enemy out of me. There is nothing worse than dying to a boss that you don't think you should have died to, or a fight you know is normally easy in the base game, and it still is, but you make a mistake and suffer for it. Wolnir really is the poster boy, but he's not the last one on the list. At number 17, we have Champion's Gravetender and Champion's Great Wolf, whom I had one death to in my run. To be honest, I actually enjoyed this fight in Soul Level 1, specifically because it doesn't end in 5 seconds. The Gravetender actually has a little bit more survivability, which means he is actually alive when the Great Wolf shows up. I didn't realise though that the wolf is weirdly passive until the Gravetender goes down, upon which the wolf begins his frontal assault. Neither of these bosses are particularly hard on their own, the only danger comes from that brief moment when they're together. It's funny though, I was actually expecting them to be way harder, and they were, just not to the degree I thought. It felt more like if the base game difficulty is a 3, then this was a 4. At least I got to actually experience the wolf's moveset without melting him down for once. He actually had me backing off, healing carefully, and waiting for the right moment to strike, which is a very refreshing experience for this duo. I still think it is one of the most boring and uninteresting fights in the series, don't get me wrong, but a clock is right twice a day. At number 16, we have Osiros, the Consumed King, whom I had one death to in my run. I put Osiros at the top of this group of bosses specifically because of the way I handled his fight. My first attempt was just me wanting to see if I could beat Osiros my way. I knew his phase 2 was going to be a problem. I knew that charge was going to be a nightmare, and I was right. Osiros is a fast, lanky motherfucker who knows how to do damage quickly and efficiently with his lovely hitboxes. So, for attempt 2, my winning run, I equipped a 100% physical reduction shield. I'd just gotten the opportunity to one-hand my regular weapon through rings, which meant I could actually use a real shield. This was the only time in my run where I did this, because blocking Osiris' regular attacks like his charge or his claw swipes, sure, it left me with no stamina, but I wasn't taking damage. And often I'd just have to wait for the opportunity to sneak a hit or two in, and immediately put that shield back up to stay safe. It neuters his difficulty in a way that I found really surprising, but it was a welcome surprise to be sure. I did not want to spend more time than necessary learning his dodge timings when I had a perfectly good shield strategy sitting right there. Soul Level 1 is about adapting and overcoming with whatever you have available, and so shielding his attacks felt like it was in the spirit of the run, and ultimately led me to an easy yet lengthy victory. In that same episode, I then decided to go to Archdragon Peak, thinking, the first boss there is going to be a free gimme. Well... At number 15, we have the Ancient Wyvern, whom I had 2 deaths to in my run. Yeah, I'm embarrassed about this one. Everybody knows the Ancient Wyvern is an easy fight with a gimme win as long as you can make it past the regular enemy gauntlet. And for what it's worth, neither of my deaths were to the enemy gauntlet. I had one attempt where I got smacked by the Wyvern itself while trying to reach the first building on the very left of the arena. Fine, it is what it is. I can't be too mad about that when we're low on health and I didn't have the prisoner's chain. It was my first attempt, though, that, broke me, shall we say. Because you know what I'm gonna say. I got through the enemies, I climbed the ladder, I crossed the wooden platforms, I jumped down onto the broken stone, and I plunging attacked the boss, only to miss and slam into the fucking ground, dying immediately. And not 3 seconds prior, I said in my recording, let's make sure I don't miss. You may make your jokes in the comments, I give you full permission, for this fight truly made me feel like a joke. At number 14, we have Yorm the Giant, whom I had 3 deaths to in my run. I was expecting at least 1 death to Yorm simply because I suck at changing my weapon on the fly mid-fight, so I'm okay taking a single death to this guy. But failing not once, but twice more after that, to handle his moveset as I charged the Storm Ruler, was honestly a bit embarrassing, especially as I died to the same attack in both of those attempts. He has this flaming fist attack that he uses following a stagger that is so quick, it'll catch you right before you recharge the Storm Ruler. The first time it happened, I was like, sure, that's fine, I didn't remember that was a move. The second time it happened, I was kicking myself. Fool me once, shame on you. Fool me twice, shame on me. Didn't help that I was having an off day doing the boss run back, so I got sniped by the profane flame ladies and bopped a few times by the stone gargoyles, which threw me off my game to the point where Yorm could capitalize. It was messy all around. It's embarrassing because in the moment I was thinking, I can't die to Yorm more than I died to the Abyss Watchers, for example, because we all know Yorm is an easy fight, and he's the only Lord of Cinder that doesn't really change between Soul Level 1 and regular, as you're doing the same damage with the Storm Ruler. Luckily, I didn't die to Yorm more than the Abyss Watchers. I died the same amount. At number 13, we have the Abyss Watchers, whom I had 3 deaths in my run, and all of them occurred in Phase 2. Phase 1 wasn't a problem for me, you've just got to be patient and wait for your openings and don't get greedy. Obviously, I preferred to wait until the ally Abyss Watcher woke up, which then allowed me to focus down the main boss because they're all fighting each other and not me. A couple attacks clipped me every now and then, sometimes I'd accidentally kill my teammate, which wasn't the smartest move, but the fact I never died in this phase was a blessing. As it turns out, I kinda struggled with Phase 2 because I've always had an issue with reading the attack patterns of the Abyss Watcher's main flame attacks. I'd always find myself getting clipped by the afterimage flames that appear following the sword swings, which was rough because due to the Lloyd's rings, I have to heal every bit of damage to regain their attack and defense buffs, and that includes little chip damage. It turned into me just trying to force the boss to use specific combos that I knew I could punish, and the rest of the fight was just me dodging away and trying to make distance because I knew I could somewhat manipulate what the AI was going for. I think this is a fantastic fight, and I'm glad it's in the game, because without it, we wouldn't have a truly difficult boss fight up until Pontiff Sullivan, and for Dark Souls 3, you really do need the Abyss Watchers to break up the monotony of the early game and their easy fights. I'm pretty satisfied with my performance here. It wasn't optimal, I was knocked down to 2 Estus, but I had a lot of fun and found it to be my first proper challenge for Soul Level 1. At number 12, we have Lothric and Lorien, the twin princes, whom I had 4 deaths to in my run. Now call me cocky all you want, I knew going into the twin princes fight that I wasn't gonna struggle. This is a moveset I just know the ins and outs of, even if it's been a while since I really had to put it all together. Lorien's first phase is all about just knowing the attacks, dodging the swings, which you can do by locking onto him, as every time he teleports, the lock-on will follow. But more importantly, you can't get greedy with your hits, because you need the stamina to avoid whatever's coming next, and because of the teleporting, you can never tell which attack is being geared up. But compared to Elden Ring, he feels like he's wading through tar with his wind-ups, and that makes him easy to predict. I love rolling through his Fire Wave attack to secure a few cheeky hits. Phase 2 of Lothric is where the challenge comes in, mainly because of Lothric's various magic projectiles that combo really well with Lorien's sword swings. While I want to say use the pillars, they're your savior, you have to remember the boss can teleport right to you while you're hiding behind one, forcing you to roll out of it and right into some magic. Whether Phase 2 goes quickly or not is completely down to whether you can hit Lothric on his brother's back before Lorien's health bar is depleted. It cuts down on the amount of time you spend in the fight and makes you more likely to one-cycle them, but I kind of found it easier to do the fight normally here. In Soul Level 1, I think it's a trap going for the easy option or the more rewarding option. More often than not, it's better to just stay consistent and don't get greedy. Lorien, after his first revive, only has half health, so if you've got the move set down like I have, you can knock him over in the next 10 to 20 seconds, no problem. It's a fight I know people struggle with a lot, even in regular runs, but I just get the twin princes. I am glad I died once or twice though, because I always get a little chuckle out of hearing Lothric's fruity-ass voice line, "Oh, you can stay here too, if you like." He and his brother saw us from across the boss arena, and you know what, they liked our vibes. At number 11, we have Champion Gundyr, whom I had 5 deaths to in my run. I did Osiros, Ancient Wyvern, and Champion Gundyr all in the same day, same recording session, and I initially just wanted to test the waters, see if Champion Gundyr was difficult on Soul Level 1. Because, to be blunt with you all, I've never found him to be particularly hard. I might get stuck on him every couple of runs, but most of the time I can kill him in the single-digit attempts, and as it turns out, Soul Level 1 is no different. The trick here is that I didn't parry him once. I've never done the parry strat for Champion because I genuinely get so much joy out of dodge rolling his attacks. I think his moveset is dynamic, it's explosive, but it's fair and well telegraphed, and when you learn to dodge through his combos, you feel like a fucking god. I see so many people default to the parry strategy because he's just too hard normally, and for me, that just isn't my experience. So even though I died to him a few times, I felt like my fully upgraded weapon was slaying, and I was doing a lot of healthy damage. In fact, I think this was my first fight with the Dragon Slayer axe, and it mopped the floor with Gundyr. I just wanted to emphasize the way I managed to beat Champion Gundyr, because I want more people to realize that he's not this tour de force that will destroy you if you don't parry him. He's just an enhanced version of the tutorial, and some of his aggressive combos may scare you, but he has openings, and he does give you more time to heal than you think. I'm so glad that my experience with Champion is the same as my regular runs, where I found him a lot of fun, but not particularly hard, though I wouldn't have minded if he were a tad more difficult because his moveset is just that fun to fight. At number 10, we have the Demon Prince, whom I had 9 deaths to in my run, the last of the single digits. I'll admit, my first 2 attempts or so, I was very worried for my time with this boss, because I realized that this was the point where my attacks were doing the normal amount of damage even with buffs. I was finally at a point in the game where the difficulty had leveled out and I didn't have any advantages with my build anymore. I just had to get good. What I like about their phase 1 is just how predictable it is. You face it enough times and you realize the left demon always starts enraged, the right demon always throws poison, then there's a brief 20 seconds where they're both enraged, and then the demon from below turns off, allowing you a ton of time to wail on the demon of pain. Pain has to die first, otherwise in phase 2, you don't get the easy to punish laser attack, instead getting some firestorm bullshit that will make your life so much harder. I found that with enough careful positioning, it was easy to stagger the Demon of Pain, and if you do enough damage by the time he powers down, you can kill him before the demon from below powers back up and retakes the aggro. Then phase 2 is all about sticking close to the boss and trying to back the Demon Prince into a wall, because I don't know why, but their AI does not know how to handle the player when they're against the wall and they have nowhere to back off to. It's the perfect strategy for mitigating their moveset, and as long as you know their dodge timings and you avoid those claw sweeps, you will be fine. It really is as simple as run towards the boss and roll underneath them, to the point where even though they have tons of health, you'll find yourself cutting them down no problem. Such a well-designed fight, especially now that I can see the exact pattern that these bosses cycle through in phase 1, it's just really impressive to me and lends itself to some genuine strategy. At number 9, we have Sister Fried, whom I had 10 deaths to in my run. I'm gonna be real with you, I didn't expect this either. I thought I was gonna be stuck on Sister Fried for hours, like attempts into the 30s at minimum. But as it turns out, my muscle memory for this fight is still going strong, and despite 1 or 2 scythe attacks that can one-shot, it turns out that Fried just wasn't a struggle for me. Her phase 1 killed me the most, I believe, with just how fast her scythe swings are. I got annoyed that I would lose an Estus to a simple attack I should know how to avoid. I know how to follow her jumping move where she turns invisible, so that was always a free hit for me when I found her. What I learned though is that you can't do more than 2 hits per attack, as she's highly likely to dodge and or punish the third. Greed will kill you here, and I had to check it at the door. Phase 2 is the easiest in my opinion, as long as Fried and Father Ariandel aren't close together, because Fried is constantly throwing out frostbite trails that will kill you if you're in them when they explode, while if you get close to her, she goes back to her melee moveset, and you don't need this when you're chasing Ariandel's chair down the aisle. Not to mention her healing, if you catch her before she gets it off, that's an extra 2 hits, but I found it easier on Soul level 1 to just focus on Father Ariandel, stick behind him, and know when to back off if he's doing a big AoE. Phase 3 is where I was worried, but as it turns out, I really didn't need to be. Her main attack I've always struggled with was her Black Flame Tornado, only I'm sure I knew this once upon a time, but I forgot until doing research for this run. You can just walk forwards underneath her, so she lands behind you, and you get a free backstab or multiple hits on her without taking damage. That is disgusting. Everything else she does in phase 3 can be categorized under, oh, I know how to dodge that, with the sole danger move being when she turns invisible and launches the multiple frostbite trails at the player. That you need to find her or she will kill you at the end, but once you know it's coming, you know what to look for. It's just the arena is bigger, so it's tougher to follow her than in phase 1. In the end, she is very easy to dodge roll through and away from, and I've known this for years, it's how I've always fought her. I just wasn't expecting a Soul level 1 attempt to also go this way. I thought she'd be too dangerous. but with the Lloyd's shield ring, she couldn't one-shot me except for a select couple of attacks. This really is a case of my build just coming together, and with her being the penultimate fight I took on in my run, the experience carried me through. At number 8, we have Half-Light, Spear of the Church, whom I had 13 deaths to in my run, and I'd like to say congratulations to Half-Light, because my Soul Level 1 run experience with him made me realize that he is the worst designed fight in this entire fucking game, and any love that I once had for him has gone out of the window. First, the fact you have to kill Argo and 2 Church Guardians throughout the fight on top of Half-Light is cheap as fuck. Second, the fact that Half-Light is almost never vulnerable to attacks unless he's wielding his bow is a fucking nightmare. Third, the fact that when he's in any form other than his bow, you can hit him, but he'll immediately respond with some katana bullshit that procs your bleed and or kills you in 5 super fast hits immediately, which is just not fun. Half-Light is a fight where you cannot be greedy, you cannot make a single mistake or a wrongly timed swing, because he capitalizes every single time. If I tried to actually have fun and attack him like a normal player, he'd just use his weapon skill and instantly kill me. He can't use those skills with his bow, which is the only way I got through the fight. By running around for 10 minutes, waiting for him to cycle back to his bow, which he always uses after that trap spell that creates the lightning spears from the ground, and then maybe, just maybe, he'll stick to the bow for a few attacks. Or maybe he'll just use it once and go back to two-handing his katana. This fight took so long. At least with a regular run, you can survive one of his weapon skills. Soul Level 1, you can't. You just have to not get hit. And it turned what was already a bit of a slog into the worst fight I experienced in this run. There's no redeeming qualities here. I don't care if you can parry him or whatever, I just found no enjoyment here. And if I weren't judging this list based on death count, he'd be in my top 3 most difficult Soul Level 1 bosses. At number 7, we have Pontiff Sullivan, whom I had 14 deaths to in my run. Sullivan is where Soul Level 1 runs truly begin, as he is the first major obstacle players need to overcome to access the rest of Dark Souls 3's late game. This is due to his high difficulty curve compared to the previous bosses you faced. Obviously, he can be parried, and I took full advantage of landing that first parry when I could. I'm not as good at his timings in Dark Souls 3, but even I know that getting a quick 1,000 damage at the start of the fight is just good. The main challenge comes from his fast combos. He's got a stab attack that comes out so quickly you'll likely get shanked by it. He has multiple whirlwind slashes that if you get hit by the first hit, you'll panic dodge and immediately get hit by the next hit. That's what killed me most of the time, actually. Then phase 2, he has bigger attacks, a giant flame AoE, magic slashes that fly through the air, and most infamously, he can clone himself into creating 2 Pontiff Sullivans. If you don't know how to handle the clone, this can be overwhelming to the point of you not being able to complete the fight. But did you know you can attack the clone while it's spawning? And if you have a +7 weapon with gold pine resin buffed onto it, you can kill the clone in 4 hits, negating that entire ability until Pontiff decides to summon him again. That's how I ultimately survived phase 2, because if I'm at full health and I can spam kill the clone, I can survive 1 hit from regular Pontiff after as punishment, and that ends as a net positive for me. I thought I was going to be here longer, as I didn't want to parry anything other than the first attack, but as it turns out, once I got phase 2 down, I overcame Sullivan fairly fast. Not to say my winning run was good, I had a solid 20 seconds where I was dodging badly and getting hit by attacks I should have avoided, but it's the results that matter, and despite the horror stories, I ended Sullivan on my last attempt of that recording session and felt like a god. I don't think he's the hardest Soul Level 1 fight in Dark Souls 3, but I do agree that for most players, he is the one you'll likely be scared of when you first try this challenge. Just get as upgraded as you can before facing him, and you will surprise yourself, trust me. At number 6, we have Aldrich, Saint of the Deep, whom I had 15 deaths to in my run. Won't lie, taking on Aldrich felt like being back in 2016 when I didn't know his moveset and he'd kill me over and over and over with the arrow spam. We don't have the health to tank all of his attacks, which means we have to actually learn to dodge them. Aldrich's first part of the fight is still relatively tame. I may have died here a couple times from getting complacent or getting hit by a stray melee attack after a poorly timed dodge roll, but aside from his arrows, which can be sneaky if you're not in the right position, you should get him to his Lord of Cinder form pretty quick. From there, the fight goes to complete shit. He can spam the arrow rain that follows you, which I still don't understand the tracking of, or the best way to avoid it. He'll often combo that with soul arrows that he fires at you from afar, though sometimes they can actually help you if they hit, as it causes the arrows to fly past you and not damage you. He loves chucking out those magic orbs that float around the room before homing in on a player, and God forbid you want to get close to him to do damage, because that fire that surrounds his body was irritatingly good at cutting off my approaches from every angle. It's because of that fire that I panicked every time I got into melee range, leading to a lot of honestly embarrassing deaths, where I just fucked up the melee combo dodge timings. There were multiple attempts that would have been successful runs had I just dodged one easy melee attack, and yet Aldrich killed me enough times to where it wasn't a fluke that I was failing. He's ironically so slow with his attacks that it threw me off, and I've gotta respect it. The magic is the main problem with the fight, and for Soul Level 1 it's not that compatible, but then the magic is annoying for most players in regular play as well, so maybe this is just Aldrich and you were all right all along. At number 5, we have Dark Eater Midir, whom I had 16 deaths to in my run. Midir was a fight I was very excited to try out in Soul Level 1, mainly because I think the majority of a regular fight with Midir is about dodging his attacks and finding those openings to hit his head. So in my mind, I'm thinking, oh, Soul Level 1 won't be that different because I just need to avoid all his attacks to be able to capitalize on his weakness. And my first session with Midir proved one very vital thing to me. He is a boss that relies on your positioning and how you choose to escape each attack, because if you decide to dodge towards him when avoiding his claws and his swipes, he'll end up doing a downwards fire breath that always caught me on the edge of its hitbox. But if I dodged away from him when avoiding those same attacks, he wouldn't use the fire, and I'd find his head right in front of me for a free hit. I found his charge very difficult to predict initially. It has an animation startup, but it doesn't have an oomph to it, you know? I liken it to when a cat gets ready to pounce. You know, they wiggle their asses, they crouch down, they get ready. Midir doesn't do that, and it threw me off in my first session. It wasn't until I took the night off and came back the next evening that Midir went down, as I started dodging his attacks really well, avoiding his flame breath, learning exactly where he'd end up at the end of each combo, and once that was all logged into the little database I call a brain, Midir was super quick. It is ironic though, I was hoping with Soul Level 1 I would see Midir's ultimate laser attack, the Phase 2 one that's super crazy that he's well known for. Once again though, I managed to stagger him and kill him in Phase 2 before he could get that attack off. I am cursed to never get personal footage of Midir using his lasers. He is a tough boss to learn, I won't pretend he's not, and I know my experiences with the dragons in Elden Ring have really helped me when coming back to Midir. I mean, the fly up in the air and breathe fire to the right move was literally ripped from Midir into Elden Ring. Yet I do think he's learnable, and as long as you go in with a game plan and you don't dodge into him and you always hit the head, you'll be fine no matter the weapon. That's my hot take though, I don't want to become some preachy guy who's like, I found Midir easy, so he's easy. He's literally the 5th toughest Soul Level 1 fight based on my deaths, so, you know. At number 4, we have Dragon Slayer Armor, whom I had 26 deaths to in my run. A big step up from our previous boss, the Dragon Slayer Armor was a real challenge for me because despite having a fairly simple moveset to dodge through, he hits like a truck and most of his big attacks will instantly kill you. I needed to beat him before doing Osiris, Wyvern, and Champion Gundyr because the Dragon Slayer's axe required a talisman in the Grand Archives, so I was fighting him without my finalized build. And yet every time I died, I didn't mind because I was having an absolute blast. Dragon Slayer armor is one of my favorite fights in Soulspawn, straight up. I think his moveset is fair, I think the way he buffs and goes two-handed is intimidating. I love that depending on your distance from the boss, there are multiple attacks that two-handed stance can go into. And I even like the Pilgrim Butterflies and how they break up the duel with lasers and spirit attacks. Would I rather fight Dragon Slayer armor alone? Sure, I would prefer it, that's why we have one in the Ringed City. But I like how the outside attacks can break up the flow for both sides, resetting us back to a neutral playing field. I almost killed the armor multiple times, but one thing I found very interesting was how as I got him to the lowest reaches of health, his shield would become extra good at blocking my attacks. I don't know if I'm placeboing myself into seeing something that isn't there, but it felt like his combos were a tad faster so that my usual punishes would just bang against his shield. It was frustrating, but also his way of completely stopping my momentum and giving it back to himself, which is the hallmark of a good fight, one where there is a back and forth between the player and the boss. I never felt like he was overtly difficult, and 9 times out of 10 the deaths were entirely my fault. However, of all the Soul Level 1 fights, he's the one I'd love to face again because I think he strikes the perfect balance. Not too easy, not too hard, just right. And a perfect barrier keeping us from the endgame and the real tough fights. At number 3, we have the Nameless King, whom I had 26 deaths to in my run, yet I found him just a little harder than the Dragon Slayer armor. You have to do this fight legitimately because there's no way around the Nameless King's health. His first phase, at the very least, is easy to get through because you can quickly stun the King of Storms and even get off a buff after the last hit, so you're ready for that phase 2 transition. At most, you have to combat the camera and just remember where the hitboxes are and what the dodge timings are for the King's more elaborate spear slams while on Dragonback, and that's assuming you don't get glitched into the fog gate, which happened to me multiple times. Phase 2 is where the struggle lies. Nameless King is one of the first bosses to truly use the delayed attacks we all know today, and I still think he uses them in spectacular fashion to really mess up your rhythm and attack timings. He's got a ton of different move types, and a lot of them aren't punishable. You need to wait for the end of long combos where he finishes with big slams, because he doesn't follow those up. His stabs and swipes, meanwhile, are riskier to punish because he can follow them up with entirely new combos. Then he enrages with lightning, and you have to dodge his spear lightning slam, which, the first time, fairly slow, but every other time he uses it, it comes out much faster, and it squished me multiple times. I love when he summons lightning to strike you from the sky. It's a free dodge and a free hit on the boss if you're close. And beyond that, it's just keeping track of all his delays, avoiding his lightning, and that will get you coming out on top. My death count was only 26 because I have spent a very long time in the past facing the Nameless King, to the point where I do just know his moveset extremely well, and if I were on a normal run with a much larger health bar, he goes down in less than 3 attempts straight up. But here I got a little bit of nostalgia for the old days, struggling against him and relearning his attacks. It was refreshing, fun, and deserving of a high placement on today's list. At number 2, we have Slave Knight Gale, whom I had 43 deaths to in my run. The final boss of the Dark Souls trilogy, I knew that Gale was going to challenge me, if only because his health pool is absolutely massive and he has 2 very distinct movesets based on his first and second phases, which meant I had to learn them both very quickly to succeed. My first session, I struggled with his phase 1 because it felt like he had a lot of momentum and a lot of very long, varied combos that can easily catch the player off guard. Sometimes he doesn't swing his sword a second or third time, sometimes he does, that sort of thing. His grab and his jump attack are always free damage moments because he's so vulnerable after them, and they're fairly easy to dodge. But what I found interesting was that, like past bosses, you can't get greedy with Gale. If your stamina goes under half the bar, dodge away and don't press for another attack, because the likelihood is that you'll then run out of stamina, take one hit, and then panic roll into another that kills you immediately. By the time I got to my winning run on my 3rd session, we're not going to mention the 2nd session because I was just not in the headspace, I didn't die once to his first phase, realizing that by playing patient and not getting greedy, I could make it to phase 2. And here is where the greed continues, because I died quite a few times to his attacks in Phase 2, thinking I could get a hit in and dodge before the attack came out, only to be beaten to the post by Gale's speed. It's funny though, I actually think he has an insanely telegraphed and very clear moveset that is very kind towards dodge rollers. He doesn't have as many elaborate combos as an Elden Ring boss, and especially once that last third of the fight hits, he only uses the same 4 or 5 attacks in just different orders. Moves that were once punishable are suddenly dangerous, and you have to keep in mind which phase you're on and which moves you can punish as you go, which was so hard for me. I kept making mistakes in the last phase because I'd go to attack him after the first hit in a combo, forgetting that it was now a combo. The last part of the fight of my winning run literally just has me dodging away and panicking because I'm so close and I've got some good healing and I know I've got his number, but that adrenaline, it pumps through you and your hands feel numb, and you either get it or you resign yourself to the next few attempts failing as the adrenaline calms down. I definitely think the crossbow bolts and the discus magic rings at the start of Phase 2 are the deadliest part of his kit though. The rings force you to reposition, and if you're still trying to get hits and be greedy, he will catch you off guard. I just backed away, waited for the rings to retract, and then moved on. And the crossbow bolts, we all know they're bullshit. If you stay close to him as he pulls the crossbow out, you can stagger him from using the attack, but it requires very high awareness to pull that off consistently. Gale is definitely one of the hardest fights in this game, even if I find his moveset really easy to handle on a normal run. Soul level 1, you just can't be careless, and that's what I learned through Gale. At number 1, we have Dancer of the Boreal Valley, whom I had 73 deaths to in my run. Who would have guessed that for me, the hardest fight in Dark Souls 3 at level 1 was the Dancer? To be honest, she should be the poster child for this type of challenge run, not Pontiff Sullivan, because oh my god, she is brutal from start to finish. She has multiple different moves she can start off with, and if you get clipped by one, you're likely going to panic roll into another, which is a given at this point in the video. Her grab is an instant kill, and while it's easy to avoid when you're actively thinking about it, that won't stop you from having a few cheeky lapses in judgment by attempt 52, followed by a sword getting plunged into your face. The Dancer is weird because she'll attack so fast out of nowhere after spending 10 seconds just walking around the room trying to intimidate you, to the point where even now, after 74 attempts and 73 deaths, I still can't tell you what her moveset is or what the best strategy for dealing with it is. I don't know if staying close is safe. I don't know if dodging away is safe. I know for a fact that the arena sucks, and the amount of furniture that suddenly appears on your screen as you're near the edges is a nightmare for reading her tells. At least her Beyblade attack is less threatening than I thought. You can often wait it out, staying just out of range before rushing in on the last spin to get a hit or two. But then she'll probably hit you with a 4-hit combo that just ends your career anyway. I suck at the Dancer, straight up. I can't understand her moveset, I find her tells difficult to read, and no matter whether it's the start or the end of the fight, she has the capability to kill me. I've had just as many runs where I die in the first 20 seconds than I did where I almost killed her. She frustrated me, pushed me against a wall I wasn't expecting to face, and said, "Yeah, you didn't think I was gonna be your hardest boss, did you, Billy S?" And this was when fighting her at the regular point in the game. Imagine trying to kill her when you first get to the High Wall of Lothric. I would rather die. Doing her hitless? Oh, I couldn't even imagine. The fact that she gives you such a big opportunity to do damage when transitioning to her Beyblade attack the first time, and yet she's still an absolute beast who handed me my ass to the point of needing multiple montages to cover all the deaths, I tip my hat to you, Diva. You are the hardest Soul Level 1 boss, because you can't fight her with a fully upgraded weapon unless you farm those Millwood Knights, so for her position in the game, as well as where your build would be in that moment, as well as the fact that she did just kill me that much, the other bosses don't compare. And that's my list. Once again, if anyone is interested in seeing my Dark Souls 3 Soul Level 1 run, be sure to become a channel member. It's $4.99 a month. There's a link in the description. You get access to all of those videos so you can watch them at your leisure. Or if you just want to support the channel normally, you can parry that subscribe button to stay up to date on all of my future videos. I want to give a shout out to my channel members for supporting me for another month. You guys are amazing. I hope you guys are excited for more of this series, even if I did kind of just spoil how many deaths each of the bosses took, but hey ho, it is what it is. And yeah, I will see you guys next time for another video. Adios.